Let's go live to Canberra now. Liberal MP Tim Wilson joins us. Tim Wilson, good to see you. Joe Hockey certainly seems to have kicked some massive goals over there in the US with the Trump administration. There's a good argument for him staying as ambassador, isn't there?
Well, Mr Hockey made the decision by himself that he wanted to return, so that's his decision. But I mean, no one's questioning what he's done and his connections, and that they're very important and a critical time in Australia and the United States' relationships. But it's also an opportunity for regeneration and refresh, and that's where Arthur Sinodinos will be heading over, and I've no doubt will build on the experience and knowledge of Joe Hockey, deepen and entrench the relationship, and as you've seen with what's coming up only this week between the two leaders, it's going to be a good time and a healthy relationship.
It certainly is. I must learn how to play golf. It seems like a certain inroad into political circles in Washington. Back home now, the government...
That guarantees that I'll never be the ambassador of the United States. So
me too, I might say as well. Now, the government back home had promised late last year that power prices would come down by up to $800 with this legislation that was passed in July. We see this morning the ACCC report showing that the highest reduction, if you like, is in Victoria, and that's $430. You have a bit of a problem here, don't you?
Not at all. I mean, firstly, not everything's going to be delivered overnight, but what we've got is downward pressure for electricity prices for the first time in a long time. I mean, this is down, prices are down stuff. That will keep one company happy that I'm using their narrative, but it's critically important for Australian households, and so there has been a reduction. We've had an impact through clarity in the marketplace and making sure there's transparency in the marketplace and the products people are offering, and it's having the effect that we said we'd have.
Now, the big stick legislation, there's been a bit of consternation over this. Business groups were not happy about this proposal before the election. Now it seems that they have cooled on their criticism. But more broadly, it just doesn't sit well, it doesn't seem, with your business constituents because of the precedent that it sets. The move is seen as anti-business. Do you have some sympathy to that argument?
Well, firstly, we don't have business constituents. We have Australians and we have consumers, and they should be at the fore and the focus of everything we do, and that's the basis in which we engage in these discussions. Secondly, this is not everyone's first preference in terms of pathway to deal with some of the challenges around energy prices, but if you think about the consumer first and not vested interests, we have to make sure that the mechanisms and the measures that we take address making sure there's competition in the marketplace, make sure there isn't too much vertical integration within the energy sector, which favours the top end of town and not actually in the interests of Australians. We're on the side of Australians, and that's what we're seeking to do through this legislation, and that's what I think you'll see when it's put forward.
CEOs today are being urged to drop their activist campaigns on social fads, quote unquote. What are these businesses referring to? I note that Ben Morton has also been quite critical of businesses that engage in this activity. What's your take?
Oh, I think every business has a right to decide what its priorities are, but I think what we've seen is too many businesses taking the easy route of things that are popular, things that focus on how they can wash themselves with love in the community, but actually not taking on the bigger and harder challenges, which is what the government.
What do you think those love jobs are?
I think it's. Well, I think there are a lot of cases where there are important issues like environmental protection or social reform, and obviously I've been involved in some of those debates myself and don't resile from it all. But I always make sure that when it comes to social causes or environmental causes, that you also do the hard yakka and the hard yards on important economic debates, which are the ones that will increase the competitiveness of the Australian economy, increase the opportunity to create jobs, and increase the opportunity to increase wages of Australians and improve the overall welfare of the country. And that's what I think the government is saying. It's not saying, don't do things, but it is saying get some proportionality right. We expect business leaders, or to be business leaders, to stand up and to fight for a competitive Australia so that we can create the economic conditions to deliver for Australians.
So it's not referring to same-sex marriage as a social fad?
No, I never said it was a social fad, but it's a social cause. It's very important, and one that I have very strong views about, and as everybody knows. But I also don't believe that business should abrogate their responsibility. I mean, and this is where I don't want to be misinterpreted. I think one of the few business leaders in this country is Alan Joyce. Alan Joyce is somebody, yes, who fought on social causes like same-sex marriage, but he also has fought on industrial relations, and I give him a huge tick for that. I wish more business, well, what I really think business bureaucrats or corporate bureaucrats would follow his lead, follow the lead of people like Jeff Wilson, who stood up against the proposition of the retiree tax, standing up for a competitive Australia that creates jobs and investment and enables us to lift the wages of the Australian community and working Australians.
Gladys Liu has been the focus, or was the focus, of Parliament all of last week. Does she need to come into Parliament, give a statement and clear up any discrepancies?
I don't think so. I think what we have at the moment is a lot of people trying to draw attention to issue. Obviously, there's been some challenges. She hasn't fully declared everything. Basically, if you go on media reports, she's seeking to clarify and to figure those out. But I've got to say, I'm concerned about this new test that's being put on some Australians, new Australians, where they have made an oath and a commitment to become an Australian citizen. They've made an oath and commitment when they've been sworn as a member of Parliament, and they should be held to the same standard. And none of this has to do with her capacity, as far as I can see, on the evidence before us at the moment, to question her capacity to do so. So I think, I suspect this story is going to peter out, while people will, some people like the Labor Party might like to add and stoke the fire. The focus should really be on the legislation before the Parliament this week.
Tim Wilson, appreciate your time this morning.
Thank you very much.